Hey everyone. I hope you all had a great weekend. I know I did. Baby Arnold was born Friday afternoon, and we are all home now. It's Sunday for me, getting settled in. But let's get going on this lesson. Uh, we're going to be looking at some influential people in business during the Gilded Age and the growth of cities. So go ahead and get out your spirals or some paper to take notes. Also, you're going to need a sheet of paper to be able to respond to the bell ringer and some mastery checks to be able to turn in at the end of the class period. So on that piece of paper you're turning in, I want you to make sure you put your name and your class period down before you turn it in. All right, so I'm going to get started on your bell ringer. Um, I want you to name your two inventions of the age and think of the impact that they had. So I want you to pick two and in complete sentences, tell me why they were important. So let's go ahead and pause the video now and for 4 minutes and start your writing. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started again. So this Friday on the 2nd, you have the opportunity for some bonus points on your test and potentially removing a daily grade if you need one to be taken away. So Friday in my classroom, I'll be hosting it. We will watch the movie Far and Away. So if you're interested, I will see you after school. There's a little assignment that you'll complete, but trust that it'll be very simple if you come in and watch that movie. All right, so looking over some things, we're looking at how demographic patterns of cities developed during this Gilded Age. What were the problems of rapid urbanization? And some things that can demonstrate and show uh, the cultural changes occurring during this time. All right, so got a warm up notes, a few video clips, and some discussion points, and of course, the sheet that I'm going to have you turn in at the end of the class period. So, quick review from, well, not yesterday, but last week. Major industries that are growing. These are some things that you might have written about: railroads, steel, communication, petroleum, and oil. So, uh, be able to name what was the name of that railroad that went across the entire continent. All right, steel. You need to be able to answer what the process was that made it cheaper and stronger and what impacts it had on cities. What invention increased the speed and efficiency of communications? And now the use of petroleum and oil and some of the uses during that time. Now, these are new technologies that changed the world more than anything in human history. And for thousands of years, we have traveled by foot, by horse, or by boat. But now messages that took hours or days to communicate could be done so in seconds. Previously unimaginable weights are being transported huge distances by steam power, not even by animal power. So these are huge changes for the human race and how our culture is going to try and deal with that. So, business leaders of the Gilded Age created a huge difference in wealth that we see. Uh, and it's a story of extravagant wealth and incredible poverty. The top image that you're looking at over here is called the Breakers. The two main floors are where the Vanderbilts would live, and the top floors were all service staff. So reports of like 40 gardeners to keep the grounds nice, 33 indoor staff to take care of everything that they needed. I mean, absolute decadence. The bottom picture, you're looking at poor housing, what most everybody else uh, that had low wage working condition. This was their living conditions for low wages. So that's why we called it the Gilded Age. Remember, it's gold plated. On the outside, things do look great. The wealth that business leaders are astronomical, but there is this dark underside that we're going to discuss throughout the unit. We're also going to end up learning a lot more about some of these business leaders. I encourage you, if you want to watch some outside things, there's a show called The Men Who Built America that does really excellent breakdowns of what these guys did, fun dramatization, so you can check it out. So these men were considered robber barons or captains of industry. And you can see that robber baron has this negative term, like a robber, someone who's taking your things, and barons, like I always think of sky barons or pilots or these ruthless individuals. Captains of industry, however, gives you that belief that these are just very successful men. All they're doing is running a fair business and making a fair amount of money for it. Some examples of these leaders are Andrew Carnegie, who ran a steel industry or the steel industry, and John D. Rockefeller. So I just want to give you a little background on these guys. Right, Carnegie is one of the richest men in history. He's a Scottish immigrant who came to the US as a child in 1848 trying to find a better life with his parents because they had lost their jobs due to the Industrial Revolution. He dropped out of school. He was a messenger boy, and he got to know the names and the faces of Pittsburgh's businessmen. And eventually, because he was around business so much, he got really good at interpreting Morse code by sound. And he could relay a message coming through in Morse code without writing anything down. And that caught the eye of the Pennsylvania Railroad Company's CEO. He ends up giving him a job, turns into a mentorship, and tells him how to invest in stocks. And this is when Carnegie gets his first real taste of money. So he invests in stocks and starts getting some coin, realizes that wooden bridges during the Civil War were so easily burned. So he starts a company. Keep in mind, he pays someone off to fight for him so he doesn't have to go to work or go to war. But as an immigrant, you could understand why he wouldn't be super excited about fighting a civil war to a country that he wasn't even born in. And he starts a company building iron bridges so they can't burn down. But he also owns mining companies that are giving him all the product that he needs for the bridges. And then he's also selling rail. So once he completes the bridge, the company that comes in behind to build the railway is buying his iron. So he gets incredibly wealthy doing this. He moves to New York to, kind of take on the city. And at 35, he hates what he sees, writes a letter to himself, says that, I'm going to quit my job and give my whole life to serving the better good of the world. So he's very wealthy, even in his 30s. Well, he doesn't follow through on that. After the Bessemer process is made, he gets in early on the first steel plants, and he is all about this scientific management that we talked about. And he works his employees like to the max, consistently pushing and constantly making efficiency get more streamlined. And he hires this guy to run the place and do all the dirty jobs that he doesn't want to do. And he's only focused on the bottom line and making money. So, they spread rumors about competitors' products being defective. They lower prices, undercut them, and then buy the companies for next to nothing. Now, eventually, he is going to push his workers too hard. He keeps cutting pay, he keeps increasing hours, and the workers aren't happy with this. Keep in mind that at this point, 9% of industry workers die on the job working in the steel mills. That's not to mention the unintended deaths later in life that were a direct result from working in that industry. So ultimately, his business practices lead to the Homestead strike, which is better known as the Homestead Massacre. We'll talk about that later. Uh, Eventually, he sells his company at 70 years old for $480 million, which is an absurd money today. Think about that 140 years ago. Um, and he decides he's going to give it all away. And this is where that reading that we did last week, the Gospel of Wealth, where he talks about giving your money away while you're still alive. He built over 2,500 libraries, one of which is in Bryan. And you're really left to think, he do all of this philanthropic efforts to make up for the sins of his terrible business practices? Also, we have John D. Rockefeller, who ran the oil industry of America for quite some time. He was a New York born son of a merchant. His dad sold homeopathic meds, so not a legit doctor, and it's selling other stuff. He knew how to hustle, and by the time he was 18, he was making good money, and he was buying and selling food, actually. Uh, then the first oil boom occurs in Pennsylvania. This is mainly to refine kerosene in all the houses, but all the houses are using kerosene for light. So there's a ton of money in this. And he saw that the money was in refining the oil, not actually drilling for it. So he hires great chemists, starts selling the byproducts like paraffin wax and tar. And within 5 years, he has bought up 36 of the 40 refineries around Cleveland. And any holdouts, he would invite them over, show them his books, and show them that he could operate at a loss until their businesses failed. So he'd buy the company after they realized it was inevitable. He'd give them a fair price. He'd hire the guys who were running the business. So now he's getting all the brightest people in the industry to work for him. And for any holdouts, he would drop the price of kerosene 80% just to make those businesses fail so he could ultimately buy them. And by the 1880s, he was refining 90% of the oil in the US. He owned 20,000 oil wells, 4,000 miles of pipeline, employed 100,000 people. By the time he dies, it's estimated that his businesses would have been worth $1 trillion. And even after Standard Oil, his company was broken up, he still was a major stockholder in the other companies and is reasonably the richest man to have ever lived. So these businesses were able to become so wealthy through the monopolies and trusts because they controlled the market. You think of Carnegie, he owned the mines, he built the bridges, he sold the steel, and this is what we built the nation with. And they could reduce competition, right? Eventually, Rockefeller is selling almost all of the oil in the United States. You start to think, why did we make this sort of a thing illegal? Imagine the control a person could have if they could change the price or the production of oil products for 90% of the nation's market. So these guys were vastly, vastly powerful. We read a piece of the Gospel of Wealth from Andrew Carnegie last week, and he, in his older age, again, believed that with his great wealth came the responsibility to share it by helping others. And that's called philanthropy. Philanthropy is sharing your money for free just to make other people's lives better. And he was, while he was giving away a ton of money, we also realized that he was pretty narcissistic. He was pretty full of himself because he believed deeply in social Darwinism. Remember, Darwin believed in survival of the fittest, so the strongest animals were survived. Social Darwinism is this idea that better humans are the ones that are successful. And because he is so successful, he's clearly of higher wisdom and intelligence, and that it was his duty to use his superior skills to help everyone, which is ironic because he used some pretty dirty business practices to get all of that money. So he definitely ruined thousands of lives, but in the end, giving a lot of it away. Um, we can skip over this bit. You read this information last week, but again, the idea that he looked at poor people as his poor brethren and that he was a man of great wealth, very full of himself. All right, so we're to another mastery check. I want you to answer these five matching questions on the same sheet that you completed your bell ringer. So just label 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down the line and match each one with the appropriate letter. And let's go ahead and give you about 7 minutes if you want to push pause and then revisit again in 7 minutes. All right, y'all, welcome back. If you didn't finish that last little bit, this PowerPoint is going to be uploaded into um, Schoology, so you can always take a look at it later. Some vocab I want you to write down and be able to remember is the difference between immigration and migration. Okay? And the way to really remember this is immigration, that starts with the I, is people coming in to the country from another country. So the Chinese, the Irish, the Italian are immigrants. All right. Migration is the people moving around once they're already in the spot. So that would be people moving from the south to the north, from the east to the west. They're moving already inside the nation. So definitely make a note in your notes. And it can be simple, just immigration equals coming in country. Migration, moving around in the country. All right, and the great term urbanization, one that you should know by now, but we need to make that point of urbanization is the movement of many people into the cities. And why are they moving into the cities? Because they need jobs. These people include immigrants, migrants, people from out of the nation and already living in the nation are moving into the cities from rural areas. All right. And these demographics shift make cities grow incredibly rapidly. And it's going to be difficult to set up all the things that you need inside of a city to support those hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of new people moving in within years of time. I mean, just think of how long it takes roads and areas to be built here locally. Imagine if a million people moved in, and how well could we cope with that? So, not taking too much time on urbanization, lots of people move into cities very quickly. All right, so take a moment with your table group. I need you to each other in your own words. What is urbanization and what caused urbanization? All right, so please keep the phones away and take this time to speak. And we'll go for this 1 minute. All right, y'all. So you've had an opportunity to discuss what urbanization is. What do you think some consequences of a city suddenly growing very quickly are going to be? All right, so I want you to be able to share a response on that same sheet of paper with your bell ringer and mastery checks. I want you to complete one of these sentence stems. Rapid urbanization would lead to more, whatever. One problem with rapid urbanization would be whatever. So take a moment, pick the sentence stem that you want to complete, jot that down, and then complete the rest of the sentence as we're continuing to move forward. All right, we are moving on. All right, so we're just going to watch this little portion of an episode from America, the Story of Us. So before we start the video, on that sheet of paper that you're going to be turning into me, I want you to write, again, 1 and 2. You're going to want to tell me what are the materials that made it possible to build modern cities? And what are some of the challenges associated with building those modern cities?
Pittsburgh transforms from a sleepy town to the industrial heart of the nation. Its population triples. Driven by a new steel railroad, millions of tons of steel are transported across America, the raw material to build the modern city. And the grandest of all is New York. It's an era of obscene opulence. New York is a playground for super-rich industrialists and financiers. Wildly extravagant, they smoke cigars rolled in $100 bills. Their wives' hats studded with diamonds. This is the Gilded Age. Land values are the highest in the world. There's only one place to go: up. By 1902, 65 skyscrapers are being constructed in Manhattan. This is one of them. It's called walking the steel. This man is 30 stories above the street. His first time at this height. No harness or safety rope. One slip, and he's dead. Veterans are called fixers. The novices are snakes, because working with them can be deadly. The old hands know just how dangerous it can be.
Thing I hate worse than poison is to take on a new man when we're near the top. They all get used to it or get killed.
No hard hats, just a 280-foot drop. A sudden gust of wind, and it's all over. They're up here 8 hours a day. Meals when they can. No bathroom breaks. They're called roughnecks, European immigrants and Mohawk Indians. Many were sailors and bridge workers, so they're used to heights.
balancing on the beams. I think it took a lot of bravery. I think it took a lot of skill, a lot of physically challenging. But I also think you had to be a little crazy.
The stakes couldn't be higher. It's a risk they are willing to take. The pay is $4 a day, twice the going rate for manual labor. Foreman William Starrett sums up his dangerous job.
Building skyscrapers is the nearest peacetime equivalent of war. Even to the occasional grim reality of an accident or a maimed body, even death, remind us that we are fighting a war of construction against the forces of nature.
He makes it. Many aren't so lucky. 2 roughnecks out of 5 die or are disabled on the job.
All right, so remember to answer those 2 questions on your sheet of paper, y'all. All right, some negative results of urbanization. So what happens to a city when tens of thousands of people are moving in just rapidly? You can see daily increases of thousands. Is that you're going to have increased poverty. A lot of these people are not going to have much money. And because people are desperate, they don't have a lot of money, you have increased crime. More people, more pollution. Because of the lack of sanitary setups for these cities, you have incredible increases in disease and not enough housing, which is going to lead to tenements. All right, so tenement, absolutely. We want you to know what this word is. I remember tenement because it sounds a bit like apartments, except a tenement is a far sadder situation. So these are multi-storied buildings like apartments, but they're divided into single room setups to put as many people in as possible into it. So by and large, you have one room that serves the whole family. We've talked before that people who are poor typically have larger families, and sometimes these families can be multi-generational, all living within the same house, inadequate plumbing, a really terrible, terrible way to live. So we're going to watch this short video that they are going to show you what it's like to live in one of these environments. And remember some of those questions that we asked before that, just imagine what it would be like, sound like, smell like, all of your senses, kind of put those in power while you're watching.
We are standing in the recreated apartment of Harris and Jenny Levine. The average tenement apartment size was about 325 square feet. You had a parlor, a kitchen, and a smaller room, which usually served as a bedroom. Keep in mind that depending on the era, depending on the time, most rooms served the purpose of a bedroom. You'd unroll mattresses or put chairs together to create beds to house all the people living here. In addition to the 5 children growing up here, Harris and Jenny would have hired at least 3 other workers to help them produce the dresses. And keep in mind, although that dress is made in a tenement apartment, it's going to go to Macy's or it's going to go to a catalog. Certainly not Jenny Levine. Jenny Levine will not wear that dress. She just makes the dress, or her family makes the dress.
By the early 1900s, the Lower East Side was the most densely populated place in the world.
All right, but not all things were negative as the cities were growing. There was a positive outlook to a lot of this. Remember, they are dirty, they're crowded, but you definitely have more opportunities, certainly more educational opportunities. Better transportation to be able to get around that town, the use of streetcars. Think of the old electric streetcars that people could kind of hop on to the side of. Services that are going to be unavailable in rural areas just because it may be hard to find a lawyer or a talented doctor or someone that could help you with all these high level kind of refined jobs that aren't going to be in the countryside that you are going to find in the city. And life expectancy is going to increase. So you can look at this chart over here. and see, what do you expect to happen with life expectancy? Like, what's happening here? It's going up, right? And, interesting to note, what's this dip? Right here around 1865, there's a considerable drop in the age, and then it rebounds. And it stays consistent until 1880. And at 1880, we just see this upward trend of life expectancy increasing. And we know that life expectancy is somewhere around here in modern times. All right, so answer these questions on the sheet that you're going to be turning in to me at the end of the class period. What are some of the positive impacts of urbanization? And what are some of the negative impacts of urbanization? So you can just write positive impacts, a dash, and then give me a few. And then negative impacts, dash, give me a few. This does not need to be in full sentences, just jot some things down, good and the bad. All right, so I do promise that we are going to have a new and improved review sheet, and we'll go over some of these answers in future videos. All right, y'all, that closes up our lesson. The remainder of the class period is yours to finish up any questions that you didn't get finished on the sheet that you're turning into me. If you finish that, put your name on it, put the class period, and turn that into the box. All right, y'all enjoy the rest of the day. Speak kindly and do well.